Good afternoon and good morning to everybody. Thank you so much for joining our session today. I'm going to let a few more people trickle in, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. I think we have a really fun, packed 60 minutes for everybody. So I appreciate you coming in, and we'll be right back to you in just a moment. All right, folks, I'm going to go ahead and wait one more minute. I see the attendees starting to fill in. I know everybody's probably just getting off of a call, so we'll go ahead and wait just another minute. I hope everybody's having a great day today. I know we got all 4 time zones represented here today, which is great. So some people are before their lunch break, and me out here on the East Coast, I'm considerably after my lunch break. So we're real happy that everybody joined us today. So I'll be right back with you in just a moment. Thank you so much. Okay, let's go ahead and get started, everybody, in the interest of time and making sure that I'm consistent and I'm conservative with your time as well. So thanks an awful lot, everybody, for joining today. My name is Doug Jury. I'm the VP of Partner Marketing here at Zadara. And I've been with Zadara pretty much since the start. I've got some great stories for all you folks out there to share kind of the Zadara experience here. And to help us also kick this off is Tony DeLuce, and he's basically with QuadraNet. So Tony, you want to say hi?
Yeah, thank you, Doug. Appreciate everyone's time today. Yeah, I've been with QuadraNet for a while, and I've been in this business for close to 20 years.
Good for you. Good for you. Yeah, I actually started my storage career back at Digital Equipment Corporation. Maybe not a whole lot of people out there remember that company, but basically they had a product called StorageWorks. So that's when I got started in this as well. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about preserving business continuity when disaster strikes. This is really going to be kind of a packed in session of what kind of tools are available for you folks if in preparation, I guess, for the ultimate disaster or even the little things that might happen. We're going to define some terms and do all kinds of cool things for you. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Tony and let him talk a little bit about our sponsor here and QuadraNet. So Tony, take it away.
So just a little bit about QuadraNet before we begin. QuadraNet was founded in 2001. They have grown rapidly ever since. We now have 9 locations, 8 in the U.S., 1 in Amsterdam to serve the European market. We specialize in small to medium businesses and a very high level of support, which consequently has resulted in very, very high retention rates. We focus on very fast implementations. We have a very flexible, creative, and knowledgeable team at every level in every department at QuadraNet. And we were very, very, very proud of being named the 10 most recommended cloud companies in 2020 by Insight Success Magazine. Next up. So basically, the services we offer begin with, there's a whole range beginning with colocation, so space and power and cooling. We also have very inexpensive dedicated servers, so that could be leased, one at a time. We also have bare metal, which are very well architected with, storage area networks, switches, firewalls, et cetera, whatever the customer requests, all the way through a managed virtualization, all the way to a full-blown cloud. At QuadraNet, we seek to bring, and we do bring the power and flexibility of the public cloud into the private data center. And our partner Zadara solutions really are key to enabling that. Additionally, we have a very unique product we call QN Monitor, although it's actually much more than a monitoring product. It also does management and automation. So through a single pane of user interface, we can automate, manage, and monitor across every major public cloud and your resources in a private data center, no matter where those resources are deployed throughout the world. We also have what we're going to be focusing on today is our disaster recovery backup as a service, but I just wanted to briefly let you know that if it comes to infrastructure as a service, even if you don't see it listed here, please give us a call. We more than likely do it. Next slide, Doug. So this is just geographically depicts the various locations we have our data centers in. We have them in Los Angeles, Seattle, Dallas, Chicago, Miami, New Jersey, and Atlanta. We actually have Zadara deployed today in Los Angeles, Dallas, and Atlanta, giving us, East Coast presence, West Coast presence, and Central U.S. presence. Next, Doug.
That's great, Tony. And also for you folks out there, if you have a particular region that isn't Zadara focused, or maybe it's not germane to this conversation today, but you want to do business somewhere else, we can spin up these technologies very, very quickly. We have a wonderful working relationship with QuadraNet to be able to get this in 45 days or less in most cases. So don't let those other states, you're not fearful for those at all. So let's go ahead and design. Thank you, Tony, for that. I appreciate that. Let's go ahead and start to talk about the content we're going to talk about today. So we're going to define some terms. It's funny. Everything that was old is new again. I remember back in my days of not only storage but backup and tape libraries and all kinds of things. The terms of RPO and RTO and things like that always came up. People have kind of gotten away from that a little bit, but little do you know that you still think about it. You still talk about those terms, but maybe not as focused. So that's really the focus of today, is to talk about the types of terms, the type of recovery vehicles and things like that, which is number two. What are your realistic schedules for recovery? And I'm going to show you some examples here, and I think we're going to kind of keep you folks really focused. What technology can we use to do this storage as a service? Zadara was one of the first companies back in the early 2011, 2012 timeframe where we kind of coined that phrase, storage as a service, and then also some recovery events. So let's define some terms. So these are really simplified. RPO stands for Recovery Point Objective. You probably have heard this. And for some folks out there, this is probably, I can get up and teach this class. I know what RPO is. It really is the maximum tolerable amount of data you can lose if something happens. I want everybody to kind of focus back in on what is your RPO and how much data can you lose and still run your business? And I think those are really the important metrics. RTO, Recovery Time Objective, it's a metric that helps you to calculate how quickly you need to recover your IT infrastructure. And we're going to go through these examples for you. If you just pull out one or two trainable moments in this next hour, holy cow, that would be amazing if every hour of your day you could learn 2 or 3 or 4 things that would help you with your job. Tony, I'm going to come back to you for a moment. When you talk to customers, do they know about their RPOs? Have they thought about their RPO and RTOs, or is this something that you are kind of leading the charge on when you talk to folks?
Good question, Doug. So it varies quite a bit. Some customers come to us and they have very well-defined RPOs and RTOs. They know what their compliance and business requires. Other customers, some of them haven't even heard of these terms, right? But we're here to help them understand what they need and help them through every part of this process.
Excellent. I always use the term the cobbler's kids have no shoes. People that are tremendous creators of technology are sometimes not very good users of technology. And it surprises me when I go to major, maybe automotive companies or high-tech companies, any of these types of companies, they may not be using their technology to the fullest. So let's talk about failure items. That's the next, if we start to peel away this onion a bit, let's talk about this. So logical failures. This is really the first set. There's no hardware failure. I always like to say there's no red blinky lights. There's nothing going on out there except there was a human error. Maybe it was an erroneous deletion. Maybe it was testing over live data. Maybe it was a file corruption that happened because of an upgrade or doing a firmware upgrade or something like that. Could have been a virus or some type of a ransomware or some kind of a threat. The industry states that logical failures represent somewhere in the neighborhood of 93% of the reason that you folks have to go to a recovery system, some way of recovering your data, about 93%. Now, I know for a fact that a lot of people will use the same schema to recover from logical failures as maybe they do for site failures. And what I'm showing here is this isn't necessarily the right course of action in some cases. Now, let's say we do have a hardware failure. Maybe we have a disk subsystem failure, or maybe it is even just connectivity to it perhaps, but the data is not there. We can't get to it somehow. The industry states that this represents about 7% of the reason that you need to recover. Now, this has flipped back when things weren't as reliable and the hardware wasn't quite as good, then the hardware failure was considerably higher than that. But today, I think it's probably even lower than the 7%, but that's kind of what the industry says. And then if you're putting all your eggs, if you've gone all in on site failure, environmentals, perhaps a lot of times what we see is it's not necessarily sites, colocation facilities like what QuadraNet has. I mean, these are rock solid facilities. So generally it's not the building itself, but it might be access to the building. It could be due to hurricanes or earthquakes or that kind of environmental type of stuff. A complete failure of a site and internal systems, requirements to start a business somewhere else. And it's really cool that we see the QuadraNet is like Tony said, east and west and in the central, so we get to pick. Industry states that this represents around less than 1% of the reason that people have to recover. So there's kind of your strategy, and there should be a different strategy for based on what kind of method or what kind of failure item you're thinking about today. So let's just, now these are all black boxes. I'm not out here to talk about what product is better than other products. I'm just here to talk about concepts. And that really, I think, is what makes some of these trainable webinars so important, is you could apply this to a lot of different technologies out there. But really, suffice to say that if you basically are using, snapshots are one of the best vehicles to recover from a logical failure. Okay, something just happened with the data. So what we're going to do is every 15 minutes in this case, we're going to create an instantaneously low capacity snapshot. So we're going to have it scripted, and we're going to go bump, or we're going to set it up in our array. And every 15 minutes, we're going to create a low capacity snapshot. Some are better than others. I think Zadara's is particularly good. We've been working with this for quite some time. And then, so you create the snapshot at 2:15, at 2:30, 2:45, and 1 o'clock, and you just keep on doing this to thousands of snapshots, thousands of events that could be treated as an instantaneous backup recovery vehicle, okay? So then we can create a clone at any time frame we want. So in this case, I want to create a clone at, say, 12:30. So I'm going to basically be using the data from 12 o'clock, the changes that occurred up to 12:15, and the changes that occurred to 12:30. Now, I'm not rummaging around and trying to find this data. This is all done with metadata, of course, to be able to present a unified clone that the way the data looked at 12:30. I could use that to recover. I could use that for testing or development or whatever I want to do. So that's the first, most primitive piece here, is just a simple hardware snapshot. Backup software is another traditional method of doing this for both logical and hardware failures, of course. Now, I want to come back and say this once, is this is not the preferred method, of course, for hardware failure, because if I lose my 12 o'clock data, I've lost everything, right? So this is for logical failures. 93% of what's likely to happen is protected by this snapshot. But now what we're doing is we're making a full copy and incrementals to be able to go LA, perhaps to LA, device A to device B, and then we may want to actually move that data using our backup software over to Atlanta. So now we have, maybe we're doing hourly backups, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and then we're going to basically move those over to Atlanta. Well, now the question that always comes up, and Tony has a great response for this, so I'm gonna just throw that out there, is that what's the difference, and why wouldn't everybody do just snapshots, or why wouldn't everybody do backup software? Can you differentiate the two for me, Tony?
That's an excellent question, Doug. So actually, we line these up to where they're similar intervals, but actually, snapshots could be taken as frequently as every minute if you wanted to. With most backup software in general, and specifically with Veeam, we're limited to about 15 minutes at this point in time, although Veeam 11 will have some improvements in that area. But the main reason is, in some cases, you can only use one or the other. For example, for snapshots, you really need Zadara to Zadara. So you need to have your local copy in Zadara storage, and you would need your disaster recovery site also with Zadara, and therefore you could just replicate, and if you need to restore, you just mount the snapshot, you're off to the races. But with backup software, it's storage agnostic. So if you're in one of our co-located data centers and you're using a Nimble, for example, we can take backups and then replicate them to Zadara. So basically, one way to think of it is, snapshots you need for remote replication, you need Zadara to Zadara, and for backups, it's storage agnostic. Any storage array to any storage array.
That's a great comment. So again, we're showing these black boxes because we're just talking about technology. And here's where you were talking as well. A good segue into this, Tony, is that now I have my LA data and I've taken some snapshots, and they could be 15 minutes, it could be a minute, just like Tony talked about. And then we're going to basically mirror that. Maybe we're going to use hardware replication instead of backup software. Because in this case, maybe it's Zadara in LA and Zadara in Atlanta. Let's just talk about that scenario. I could then turn on a full instantaneous low capacity snapshot on the left or in LA, and then I can basically do replication between sites to the right or to Atlanta. And it's just, we're just 4 clicks away from being able to do that, to be able to have that. And then what I can do is, and what happens all the time is people do these DR copies and they go, well, could I actually survive a DR? Could I actually survive a disaster? And a lot of times your plans require you to do some testing. So what we can do here is create a clone, and then that clone is basically your test. You mount that to a virtual machine, and you could now have the ability to see if my data actually could be recovered and my business could take off from there. So again, what we're doing is we're taking you down the knowledge path of what kind of technology based on RPO and RTO, what's likely to fail, and then what are the products, whether they be hardware designed or maybe like backup and Veeam designed to be able to recover. So now let's talk about some realistic schedules. So in this particular case, I'm going to do a snapshot. In this case, I'm going to just say an hour. Now, Tony said I can do one every minute, and that's absolutely true. But here I'm going to say an hour so the customer said I have an RPO of 1 hour, so I'm going to do a snapshot every hour. So that really is easy to do. I go into a graphical interface and I go ahead and say schedule 1 hour, do this volume, and don't do that one. So I can do this based on a volume, based on a file system, whatever I want to do. So I can basically schedule that. Now, every hour I have these backups. They're full copy backups that take 0 space until you start writing, but they're like having a full backup. In this particular example, I have 12 different backups. So as I move to the backup schedule using perhaps a product like Veeam, I'm going to actually move the data from the black device onto some other device like we talked about to be able to do our backup schedule. So here I'm also setting this as a RPO of 1 hour, and my backup is also going to be 1 hour. So the difference here is, why would I do a snapshot over a backup? It all depends on whether you want to have 1 terabyte, in this case becomes 2 terabytes, becomes more, or in a snapshot, 1 terabyte becomes 1 terabyte plus the changes, plus the changes, plus the changes. So a little bit more economical sometimes, but we have to also think about what's likely to fail and what are we protecting from. So that really is the value of this whole session here. So that's the backup schedule. Yeah, Tony, go ahead.
So with backups, Veeam also supports incremental backups. So similarly, you would only be, your first backup would be a full backup.
Right.
Every subsequent backup would only be the incremental changes.
The changes. Absolutely. Great. That's a great point. So 1 becomes 2, 2.1, 2.3, 2.4, or whatever. So you're absolutely 100% correct. And so the other piece is, let's say that for site failure, remember it's less than 1% of what's likely to fail, 1%. So I'm setting this up for a 4-hour RPO, and basically I'm going to do snapshots every hour, just like I set up before. But I'm going to pick off one of those snapshots to mirror over to Atlanta every 4 hours. So I basically have a mirror event, a mirror event, a mirror event. So in this particular 12-hour time frame, I'm basically doing, in this case, 3 different mirroring events over to Atlanta. So now my RPO is 4 hours, as we talked about, and basically we'll talk about recoverability in just a moment. So I know that Tony has customers that are doing mirror, whether it be through backup software or hardware mirroring between LA and Atlanta. And I bet you can't even tell me a time, Tony, that you actually had to use Atlanta for recovery because your sites are so secure. But certainly that doesn't mean that people shouldn't do this.
That's correct. I mean, it is. We have not since the time I've been at QuadraNet, which is about 6 months. But it's one of those things that if there's a geographical catastrophe, like something, you're in the LA data center and California falls in the ocean or something like that, you definitely need at least your data. You should at least have your data in another data center, if not a full-blown DR solution.
So if California falls in the ocean, my Arizona property is, I guess, oceanfront. So maybe that's something I can consider. Perfect. So a little bit on technology. So now let's go into some technology, and I'm going to now represent storage as a service and talk about this. So back in 2011, when Zadara was coming together, we basically said that when we design our storage as a service solution, now we're showing this presentation in the theme of recovery and backup and things like that. But of course, a large portion of our storage as a service goes out as production volumes and things like that. So when we sat down 9 years ago, we said, what we got to do is we have 3 things to do, and we have to do them all in one product. We have to basically create enterprise grade performance and security. That really is table stakes today. We really need to have this enterprise grade product with all the various pieces that make you enterprise grade. So in 9 years of working here, I know for a fact that I can stand toe to toe with all the other RAID and storage manufacturers out there. Now, just recently, we also added some virtual CPUs to that and memory. So now we can actually do some Amazon EC2 compatibility. If anybody's thinking about maybe a repatriation away from a hypercloud or something, we have that basically with QuadraNet as well. But primarily our storage product is solid state disks, hard drives, encryption, in-flight and at rest, snapshots and mirrorings, which we're talking about today and premiering today as well. So enterprise grade, you don't have to look any further for that. But really the difference, think about 9 years ago when the clouds were just evolving. We said, we're going to design this so you only pay for what you use. Basically, you go up, you pay more. You go down, you pay less. We do upgrades on the fly. We give you new technology when it's available. Since I've been sitting in this chair, we've taken customers from 200 gig SSDs to 8 terabyte SSDs, 200 gig to 8 terabyte, and they didn't even know this was happening, and their price went down because now the density of those drives. So the ability to do on-premise, colocation, in the cloud, scale up, scale down, do hardware upgrades, fully elastic, as big as you want it to get. That's a really key attribute, especially if you're doing backup for our archival where you want things to get very, very large. And then we also back it up with not only the tremendous support that we get from our partners at QuadraNet, but we also have our 24/7, 365 proactive support. If you have a volume that looks like it's going to run out of room at 3 in the morning on Christmas Day, our operations team will basically add more storage to that on the fly, and you'll just continue to open up your gifts with your kids in the morning. So this proactive support, different than reactive, but proactive, looking ahead, looking down the runway, and making sure that things happen properly. Seamless upgrades, migrations, all those kind of things as well. So if we take these 3, very few times, and I'm sure there's products out there, but very few products out there bundle these 3 as enterprise grade, pay for what you use up and down, and then this tremendous support. So what I'm introducing here today for you folks is something called Zadara Cloud Services, and it's Z Compute, Z Networking, and Z Storage. And so what that means is a single product that was designed to be able to do compute as you wish, as big or as small as you want, storage as you wish, as big or as small as you want, and then connecting it all together with load balancers and elastic blocks, VPCs, all the various pieces that we need there. So we're going to dive into these a little bit more detail here. So Z Compute, or as QuadraNet calls it, QN Cloud, elastic compute, which scales as their business demands or as your business demands. So now we have this stack running at QuadraNet or in your data center, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And basically, it's a self-service prescription if you wish. We basically predefine fully customizable virtual machines, all running in an EC2 compatibility hypervisor or orchestrator, if you will. So it supports the APIs. If you're familiar with AWS, we can do it there. Or you can just use the EC2 or the orchestration to get yourself onto a Microsoft or Linux workload. So that really is the easiest part of that. And then we have those other pieces there as well. So the Z storage part. Yeah,
Hey, Doug,
Tony?
can I comment one second on this?
Absolutely,
Yeah. So go back to
please.
the last slide.
Yeah,
Hey,
sure
so what we're very QuadraNet are very, very excited about this product because we have a lot of our colocation customers that are currently using AWS. And in order to access AWS, you either have to go over the public cloud or you need to provision a direct connection. In this case, if you're in our Century data center or in our Atlanta data center or in our Dallas data center, we're a cross connect away. So basically, you can consume very similar, almost identical AWS services without incurring any latency whatsoever because the services are in the exact same building within the same four walls as your colocation.
That's perfect. And we're, I talk to hundreds of customers a month, and the whole term of repatriation is coming up everywhere, and people are repatriating, moving back to, so maybe Amazon East or Amazon West or whatever. Maybe that's too far away from the actual the creation part of the data creation site. So maybe I want it in other facilities. Maybe I want to basically move it down to LA or get it to Atlanta or get it to the central part in Dallas, and I want to be able to do those things. So this whole concept of edge starts to pop up and being able to do that. So, but I want to bring my knowledge and I want to bring my skills and I want to bring all the learning that I've done, perhaps if I am repatriating. So that really is the key to this. If you are an AWS customer, if not, and then we can bring along with it all these protection schemas that we're talking about today. Perfect.
Yeah, and the other side of it is that with AWS, it's like, they'll let you put all your money in the bank, without any cost at all. You can put all your data there free of charge. But if you ever want your data back, egress charges, right?
Yeah.
At QuadraNet, whether you're using the Z storage, QN store, or S3 compatible or compute compatible with AWS, we don't charge any per gigabyte ingress or egress charges whatsoever.
Those are those hidden charges that people just I always make it synonymous with renting an Avis car for $300, and then you get the bill for $1,000. You go, well, what happened to the $300? Well, you drove it. You drove it in and out. I said, well, I expected to do that a little bit,
I talk to customers all the time that are like, well, we signed up, we were expecting a $3,000 a month bill, but we're, a month, but we're getting charged $7,000 a month.
Yeah.
It's all those, not only is it egress, they also, it's every API call after, every so many API calls, there's charges associated with it as well.
Perfect. So the Z storage from Zadara, also called QN store from QuadraNet, and we're going to define a virtual private storage array. Stay put. We're going to basically create a virtual private storage array, which I call the cool slide. It's a slide that shows the creation of a VPSA and something that you folks really need to have or want to take a look at. So if I go around this in kind of a counterclockwise environment, you can see my mouse here, we can support all the different media types. We don't believe that the whole world needs nothing but SSDs or nothing but HDDs. We believe that there's a mix out there of SSD applications and hard drive applications, and then this hybrid using a solid state drive maybe as a front-end cache to a hard drive and kind of getting you the best of best performance and the best pricing model. So basically that's where we're going. I can take this environment and I can put it in available colos, I can put it in data centers, I can put it in a cloud, I can put it in lots of different places. And as Tony said, we're just a cross connect away from being able to get to your rack or wherever where storage as a service is available there. So we'll talk about that more. And then off to the right, we can basically support all the different data types, the block, the file, the object. We believe that there's a lot of silos out there today. You buy best of breed for block, you buy best of breed for file, you buy best of breed for object. But what it does is it starts to tear your hair out a little bit, because now you've got to have 3 different management styles, 3 different trainings. This spindle doesn't work in that device. So if you have too much block and not enough file, you can't kind of move the drives or the devices over. We believe a single multi-tenant architecture, but a single tenant experience. And that's where we're coming up to this really cool slide here. So if you take this whole thing, those are really the 3 pedestals, or the 3 legs of the stool that we talked about earlier, is the ability to do enterprise storage, pay as you go, and then we'll add the support to it later on. Now, I'm not going to read all these to you. You will get this deck and you will get a copy of this recording. So you don't have to take a whole lot of notes. But again, we talk about enterprise class services, block, file, and object. We talked about all flash, deduplication, all the things that people are looking for today. Thin provision volumes, probably haven't heard that in a while, but we want to over allocate if that's the way you want to do it. So we have the ability to thin provision our volumes. Large volume sizes, all the protocols that you need, multi-zone high availability. So we can then actually drive through a building failure by basically taking half the technology and putting some of it in building A and the other rest of it in building B in a metro environment as well. Upgrades we talked about. The real reason to be here today is this remote mirroring, snapshot, and clones as well, and then the encryption pieces that are there as well. Now, not only do we have this piece, but we also have what we call ZOS, or the object storage. It is one of the largest growing segments of storage right now in the country. There's an awful lot of growth in object storage because, if you look at your hard drive today, I bet if you look at the data types, you're going to have more pictures, more music, and more objects on your hard drive than you have structured and non-structured type of file systems and things like that, or files. You're probably going to have far more objects out there, like I said, pictures and movie files and things like that. It's just an explosive area. So we have to add that to it as it's the same product. It's just basically we're going to create this object storage from the same set of drives that we're going to have. So this is all going to make perfect sense in just a little bit. Erasure coding, as well as multi-zoning and all the various pieces that we want to be able to do here. It's very similar to the VPSA. So let's create one. You pick your location, you pick your storage, and you add on some advanced features. Now, when you go through a company like QuadraNet, you're going to basically be, Tony's going to basically hook you up, and he's going to basically be taking care of a lot of this for you. But you also have this method of being able to do this way. So you're going to go into the user interface, and you're going to basically, click on QuadraNet, and then you're going to go over to number 2. And or I should say down here, and you're going to pick the site, whether it be Los Angeles or Dallas or Atlanta. And this is what our service providers do for us. This is what a lot of our end customers do as well. But I wanted to kind of show you the backlot tour here of what really is going on for VPSA, because it makes sense for the next slide. So we're going to choose our location, and we're going to assemble our VPSA. So in this case, I'm going to choose a 200 engine and 4 solid state drives. This is where nothing like this has ever happened before in the storage industry. So I'm going to assemble my VPSA. I also have the ability to add some premium features. In this case, I'm just highlighting Docker. If you're running Docker containers, this is one of the few storage devices out there that basically has the ability to run a Docker container right inside the storage array itself. And then we're going to create the VPSA. So now I've got this 200 engine and 4 SSDs. Remember that, if you will, as we go to the next slide. So as soon as I hit the create button, the Zadara software wakes up, and it basically says, oh, I've got some cool things to do. Okay, first thing I got to do is you set a 200 engine, which is right here. I've got to assign 2 cores, an active and a standby core. So now what we're doing is we're bifurcating, or we're segmenting our architecture into cores and disks and networking and all those various pieces. So So here I am, I'm creating a 200 engine. So I have an active core and a standby core. I've designated 4 SSD drives. And this might be as a database as a service module. You might be running SQL or Oracle or whatever on this. So now a customer right behind you doing that, so they come in and they create a 400 engine using hard drives and cache, and they select 10 drives. Now what you can see from this slide is they're selecting different cores, they're selecting different drives, they're selecting different credentials and logins, encryption schedules. They're selecting everything new, everything different. So we have an air gap between VPSA 1 and VPSA 2. So even though you're coming to a multi-tenant partner like QuadraNet, your VPSA is completely segmented from other VPSAs. Why Verizon chose us over every other public cloud and partner out there is that we could physically show them what drives they were using for their application. Because if something happened to drive number 6, they needed to be able to get drive number 6 sent back to them so they could shred it, so they could literally physically shred this thing. And nobody else in the industry could share with them where their data physically was on the same model that we have. Remember, a couple of things here. Pay as you go, pay only for what you use, pay up and down, have a completely storage as a service model. Nobody else could share that with them. So they also wanted to be able to do SSD drives. They wanted to be able to do hard drives. And they also wanted to create this object stack here. So here we've created an object stack and we've created 6 drives. So all these drives can be used for whatever purposes you folks need. They're all going to be segmented. They all have the ability to grow or contract as well. And one of the things that we're not going to talk about today, but maybe in a future webinar, is this immutability and this lock on the object. Have the ability to do record locking with some of the great software like Veeam. We now have the ability to actually put together a ransomware strategy, not only if what's likely to fail, but what's likely to happen to your data. So if you want to know more about ransomware, please give Tony and our team there a call and we can talk about this. So you can imagine that in a productive cloud, we have thousands of customers, but each customer has their own login, their own credentials, their own drives, their own cores, their own memory, their own cache, their own everything, their own snapshot schedules. It's completely segmented. Very, very different than if something that you're familiar with, say LUN management or logical units. Anything you want to add to this, Tony? Because I know you've put some of this together for your customers.
No, I mean you nailed it. I mean that is very impressive and a significant advantage.
Perfect, perfect. So now let's talk, now that we've got all the pieces here, now let's talk about what the heck are we gonna do, okay? So now I wanna be able to share with you folks, let's say that we have a logical failure. And the logical failure says that I basically have an RPO of 1 hour. So if something happens, if I get a corruption, I can do this. So at 3:02, something happens. Something happens at 3:02. And so what I do is I mount this 3 o'clock snapshot. Remember, I create a clone and I can mount this 3 o'clock snapshot and I can basically go through, I can mount it. I can have this ability to browse into the snapshots that I've created. And I can say, all right, here's one that I created at say 2 o'clock and at 3 o'clock, 1 o'clock. And I now can basically right click on the file, select the restore from previous, and bingo, I've now recovered it. I can do this not only at a file level, but I can also do this at a file system level. I can do this at an application level. I can do this at a virtual machine level. So I can basically recover very, very quickly here. So this is where we're heading here. The hardware snapshot being able to recover from a logical failure, and really the RTO in this particular case is a minute. And so what I've done is, in fact, let me go back one slide, because when I created these VPSAs, I created these icons here for you. That's a VPSA, that's a VPSA, and that's a VPSA object storage. So when I go through these slides here, I've kind of superimposed my logo onto this. So now I'm physically taking a look at some individual technology here and kind of moving away from some of the black boxes. So in this particular case, we have a 1 minute RTO, which is fabulous. The backup and recovery. So now in this case, I'm doing a backup and an incremental like Tony talked about every hour. So in this case, we have that same event at 3:02. And you know, there's a little bit more to do with the backup software, a little bit more, not a whole lot. So I'm going to go basically say there's an RTO of 15 minutes. But you know what? There's a lot of backup schemas out there, a lot of things. I'm kind of generalizing here, but that could be much less as well, even if you chose to do a backup recovery from a logical failure. You go through this a lot, Tony. Anything you want to add to this as far as the differences between recovering from a snapshot, perhaps, and recovering from a backup set?
Well, I mean, they're very similar from an effective standpoint. You know, as we discussed kind of early on, you know, it's about a, it's really the not, you know, the RPO is going to be, the RTO is going to vary in both scenarios depending upon the number of VMs you have, the amount of storage you have, you know, the size of the environment, etc. But the RPO, you know, you can get much more aggressive with a snapshot, you know, down to about a minute, whereas we're at about 15 minutes on a backup.
That's fair. So if the difference is, you know, we got to have it back up quickly, and we want to use something like the snapshot convention, it might work. But you know what? A lot of times you're gonna do both. The snapshot is essentially free. It comes with the product. It's essentially free. So why wouldn't you do snapshots, and why wouldn't you do backup for potentially those hardware failures as well that we talked about? So that's a perfect segue there.
Another item that comes to mind is
yeah,
is what we're talking about is primarily virtualized environments. If you know, we do still have some customers that are all on physical servers. For physical servers, we can actually install an agent base, you know, an agent, you know, on the server, and we can actually you know, so we don't need a completely virtualized environment like we do for image-based backups and for snapshots. We can do files, and then the customer can say, hey, okay, I want this directory, this file, you know, I want these files from this directory backed up, or I you know, exclude this directory, these files, right? So they can actually specify the inclusions and exclusions, and we can only back up the exact files they want. And it's also it's very similar in that it's incremental, right? So it's only the changes that occur between backups that are backed up after the first full backup.
Excellent. And somebody typed in a follow-up question to that, Tony. It says, I only have a half a dozen VMs and a couple of terabytes of virtual machine images. I think they're talking about scale here, you know, and they really have somewhat of a small environment. We're trying to kind of find that. So then they add on, they say, if I wanted to be able to recover any VM image or file from, say, the prior 7 days, approximately, what would the backups cost in that case? And what are we looking at here? Because I said that snapshots was free, but I know that backups, you'd have to spend some money on some of that cost. So what's the differentiation here from maybe a snapshot to being able to recover the full VMs?
You know, on snapshots, of course, you know, it's Zadara to Zadara, and you know, and the only additional cost is the cost of the small amount of additional storage. But with a backup solution, you know, all of them, you know, in general, but specifically for VM as well, there's some licensing involved, right? So we do have a promo going currently till the end of the year where it's 25% off the VM licenses and 25% off the storage. So in order to kind of size it, you know, we do need a couple variables. We need to know, you know, the total amount of storage of that first full backup. And then we need to know how much that is changing on a day-to-day basis. So, for example, if a customer wants backups over the last 7 days, and they're changing about 5% a day, which is actually, you know, more than a lot of customers, you know, change their data in a day. You know, the total cost of that, say 6 VMs, a couple terabytes of data, you know, with 5% change rate. With a 7-day retention, meaning they can go back at any time over the last 7 days and restore a VM or a file. We're talking about $200. So you know, it's not you know, very expensive.
Great answer. And you're hearing, you know, there's a lot of knowledge here in QuadraNet and Tony. So now let's talk about this one environment here where we have to fail over to another site. So we're really appreciative of the fact that QuadraNet has not only LA but also Atlanta. So let's say we're doing those hourly snapshots. So we're doing them every hour, and this is a 12-hour schedule here. So every hour, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, we're doing those really small snapshots. But then we're doing a 4-hour DR or mirroring application. So we're actually moving the 4 a.m. snapshot. So the first thing we do is we move the 12 o'clock version over, and that basically gets over to Atlanta. And then we basically have ourselves set up for logical failures from 1, 2, and 3 o'clock. And then 4 o'clock, we're going to throw over the latest snapshot. And then we're going to go ahead and do 5, 6, and 7. And we're going to throw over the 8 o'clock and so forth. So we're going to kind of have this as a rolling schedule. We're not going to also roll in these snapshots over here directly right away. We want to have a certain amount of snapshots over here that we can do, because anytime there's a rolling disaster, let's say that it is a hurricane or an earthquake or something, is a rolling disaster. We want to have a snapshot enabled mirror in this case, because maybe the data that we just got recently is bad because of this rolling blackouts and things like that. So we may want to basically choose our snapshots wisely to be able to recover from the last one that actually worked out really well. So in this example, as a really simple example, we have done all this schedule. We have at 7:02, we have an event. So an event happens at 7:02, and we now have sent over to Atlanta a 4 o'clock snapshot. So we've already got it over there. It's happy, it's up and running, it's good to go. So now literally I can now take from that 4 o'clock snapshot, I can now mount that as a clone, mount that to my virtual machines, and literally run the data that was existing in LA at 4 o'clock. I can now run that and bring that back up again. And this could be, it all depends on how many virtual machines you want to bring up, how long it takes to reboot some of those, how long it is there. But in this particular case, I'm showing that about 7:30, you might have a happy face over there and you might be up and running here. So again, RPO and RTO is so important. If you want the lower, and this is the old joke, the lower the RPO and the lower the RTO, the more digits there are in your customer solution. So basically, if you want, minutes or instantaneous, the cost of that solution might be high. What we got to do is consult with you folks, and we want to make sure that we hit the harmonic, we hit the balancing act for what's the right solution at the right cost to be able to provide the recovery that you're looking for. So for snapshot enabled, yeah, go ahead, Tony.
That for the vast majority of applications, the change rate of data, if it's consistent throughout the day, it doesn't really use that much more storage at all, whether you're taking snapshots or backups every hour or once a day. There's some applications where a customer keeps overwriting the same data over and over again. In that case, it would take more storage, but really it's the cost, can be kind of, doesn't really vary as much. In that case, what does vary is the time, right? So if you've got an environment with hundreds of VMs, the amount of time it takes to bring those hundreds of VMs up at the remote site, it's going to be a lot longer as if you've got 2 or 3 VMs, right? But it's all going to be a function of, we want to make sure we size the connectivity between the sites appropriately. We make sure that the environment at the DR site is of the right size so that it doesn't take a long time. So where the cost would come in is, if you, by making sure you have adequate resources for the VMs to spin up on at the remote site, and that's where you would incur the additional cost from.
Perfect. See, this guy knows his stuff. So as the final slide to the recovery piece here is primarily we select the snapshot, we create a clone, we restore complete or portions of the volume by mounting it to a virtual machine. So now our data's there. We're real happy. And let's say that this was a mock. Let's say this was a mock disaster or failover. We can take that 4 o'clock snapshot and mount it to some test servers over there, spun up by our V or QN compute. We can spin those up. You don't want to have a whole lot of servers just hanging around waiting for a disaster to occur. You want to be able to spin them up, pay for them, start your business, and then when the disaster heads away, we want to be able to spin those back down again. So again, as a service, compute, as a service, storage, whatever works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip over this, and I'm going to actually go to, I'm going to kind of leave you with a couple of other things that we want to talk about here real quickly. So let's talk about use case number one. It's the most primitive backup scheme that we would talk about. In this case, we have Veeam. Primary storage goes over to VPSA. That's very, very simple. And that is, it doesn't, this is where Tony was talking about heterogeneous. Primary storage could be anything. Could be, in this case, Nimble, and then we're going to basically back it up over to storage as a service. Where I want to get to is this immutability piece. But here, let's say that we're going to use Veeam all in. We're going to go primary storage to VPSA, and then VPSA, we're going to basically move that over to the remote site in Atlanta. So that really is a very easy way of starting this up. Remember, there's so many choices to this. Now, when we talk about our friends at Veeam, both partners of Zadara and at QuadraNet, they have this concept called 32110. 3 different copies, 2 different data types, one of which is offsite, one is immutable, and 0 errors to basically check and verify. So in this particular case, I've kind of structured this that it doesn't matter what the primary storage is. But if you notice, we have our primary storage here, so that should be very non-threatening to you. You just keep on doing what you're doing. There's really no requirements to change there. But we have 3 different elements here from Zadara. We have our performance tier, which could be SSD. We have our capacity tier, which could be hard drives. And we have our objects stored with long-term retention and immutability, record locking to be able to do this tier. So if we go back and remind ourselves, we have 3 different copies, check. We basically have 2 different media types. We have a block and we have an object, check. We have one which is off-site, which now we're talking about perhaps in Atlanta, check. And we have one that's immutable and record locking, check. And we have the ability, as the partnership, QuadraNet can now create something called Data Labs, and they have the ability to test that to make sure that everything is working well. So not really the topic of today's topic is ransomware, but certainly something that I think you folks are also equally interested in as well. For the DR case, we're going to take this a little bit deeper. So we migrate perhaps over to, in this case, let's say that your goal is to move away from primary storage and you want to basically get this DR going here, but you also want to, maybe this guy is up for refresh, or maybe there's a technology change here or whatever. We have a very simple way with professional services. We can basically migrate that data locally, whether it be in LA or in your own data center, and then we can basically turn on the mirroring. We now can have our LA and Atlanta. Very, very easy. One of the toughest things in my 40-year career has been people trying to create a DR copy and also migrating their data between different devices. So that to me is really where we're headed here. So I'm going to go back to this slide here because I did want to share that with you folks for just a moment. So I hope what we've done today is we've defined some RPO and RTO terms. We've looked at some recovery methods. We have what a realistic schedule might look like and what technology can we use from storage as a service perspective. My buddy over here on the right, Nolan, from Ancestry, he chose us to be able to do some of this technology we're talking about today. Prior to moving to the cloud, we were frequently making unplanned trips any hour of the day to the data center to maintain systems, replacing drives and inventory and things like that. In the middle of this situation we're in here for 2020 COVID, we now have, he said, I can just stay at home and not worry about this. Our users that interact with the data in real time are seeing much better performance. Therefore, if you're a customer of Ancestry, you might be able to see better induction of new data and so forth. So Tony, I'm going to turn it over to you. I know that you've got some really cool specials. I hope everybody hangs on for another 2 minutes while Tony can basically talk about some specials going on at QuadraNet.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we have a promo going right now with Veeam using Zadara storage, 25% off both the Veeam licensing and the Zadara costs. And then additionally, with this webinar, we'd like to offer the following promotion, which is simply contact me. My contact information is there. Set up a discovery call to discuss your backup needs and DR needs, and do that by the end of this year, and we will provide up to 3 months of free service.
Excellent. I've got some questions that came in along the way here, so I'm going to go ahead and read a couple of them, Tony, while we have a little bit of time. This comes in from a customer that says, can I have a VPSA in both my data center for production and use QuadraNet for disaster recovery? And so I'm actually gonna, it was interesting, but I'm gonna go to this slide right here. So here, that what they're asking is the question of, I have basically my primary storage. They want to basically use Zadara as their production, maybe something like this, and then use QuadraNet for their DR site. And the answer I'm going to give to that is real simple. Any VPSA on the planet can find any other VPSA on the planet. We have 300 sites today overall for Zadara. From a DR perspective, a snapshot perspective, a backup perspective. So any basically VPSA can find any other VPSA with the proper credentials, logins, IP capabilities. You got to have all the security things as well. But basically, the answer is yes. Any VPSA can find any other VPSA. So if you're not ready to make a major move, but you want to just get this ball started, I think that basically we have a great response for that. And another question came in while I was talking a little bit about encryption. So let's talk about that just for a moment. Doug, you talked about encryption of the data. Can you elaborate on that? We require our data to be encrypted. And you know what? That's not unlike a lot of our customers that require encrypted data as well. We support AES 256, which is a very stringent code. We do in-flight and at rest. So basically everything is protected. And then we also have, if you want to basically disband or decommission a VPSA, we have what we call this shredding feature, which is basically 3 data patterns over the drives to make sure that that data is absolutely gone. And then if you really want the ultimate, like Verizon, you could literally get us to ship you the drives, and you can basically run them through a metal shredder, and you can basically get those drives back as well. So basically DOD, NASA, USDA, Bureau of Land Management, all the basic company or government agencies out there that require that. So that's the end of my question list that came in for us. It looks like we finished up right about at the right amount of time. I want to thank everybody for joining. I really appreciate the interaction. Tony, I think you and I, this sportscaster mode goes extremely well. So thank you so much for your time today. And I guess with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn your day back over to you folks, and make it a great day. And we'll be talking soon. Make sure you reach out to my friend Tony. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.